Hello everybody, welcome to our next session today, Cities in Lockdown. My name is Joshua Posaner. I'm a senior policy reporter based usually in Berlin for Politico Europe. I'm delighted to host this session, which really gets to the heart of an issue that's crucial for many, if not most of us, that's living in cities, urban centers, and how these areas are changing under the pandemic. So we have three people on the panel to discuss these issues. Naturally, we have Matúš Vallo. He's the mayor of Bratislava since 2018. He's a trained architect and an urban planner. We have Rakušan. He's the leader of the Mayors and Independence Party in the Czech Republic. He was also the mayor of Kolin from 2010 to 2019. And joining us from Budapest is the Budapest mayor, Gergely Karácsony. He's been mayor of Budapest since 2019 and is also a leading opposition figure in Hungarian politics. He's joining us via video link from Budapest with, we hope, flawless simultaneous translation. So I should just remind you before we get underway with the questions that we're taking questions also from the audience via Slido, that's in the GLOBSEC app. As well, we have 40 minutes to get through a lot of ground, so let's get straight underway. I think a good place to start this conversation would be with you, Matúš, as you're the host of this summit here in Bratislava. When we look at the pandemic and the impact on urban centers, what kind of capacity have cities needed to build quickly to counter these evolving crises? Can you give us the experience from Bratislava?
Yes, thank you very much. And firstly, let me welcome all of you in our beautiful city, Bratislava. I say thanks again, GLOBSEC, you did it again on very nice and fantastic level. So I'm happy we have GLOBSEC in our city. To answer your question, I mean, the first thing is that you are not ready for such a crisis. Nobody was ready for such a crisis as we are living now. And I need to go through very quick. I'm making fun of it. The lessons about about the management in crisis, which is something completely different. I was trained in. I'm a trained architect with 15 years of experience. So the first thing was maybe not first in the list of importance, but one of very important thing was to build a good communication channels. We always spending a lot of time to explain to our citizens and to inhabitants of Bratislava what's happening, and we were ready for that. We have very good communication team, so that was maybe the first thing to completely open every bit of information we were sure of. And to communicate, to explain, to make them feel safer in terms of having right and exact informations. That was one of the first things. Oh, and of course, after there, you have a group of citizens you are taking care of, which are for us the most group of these citizens in danger were elderly people. That's very important. You know how COVID is working, so that was our focus straight away. And I need to say, before we had any case of COVID in Slovakia, during the February of 2020, we already did a special training for employees in our elderly houses. We did a special measurement in these elderly houses to be ready and to start protection very soon. And I'm glad we did it, and it shows how good team we have in Bratislava in this case. And of course, the second group of citizens are people without homes. That's very important. They cannot go to have quarantine somewhere. They don't have a place to be. 14,000 people we built very, very soon, a year ago. In March 2020, we built, we are calling it also today village, quarantine village. So we build a temporary structure where people without homes can spend their 2 or 3 weeks of COVID, and so they don't need to be in the street where and in danger to other people, but also to themselves, of course. So this was if you are talking about what we were forced to build, what kind of capacities it was like all of them, all of possible capacities. I'm thinking now.
And you have this real question about the role of city administrations in providing just the services you talked about in a time of crisis. But then what is the gap between central government and city administrations? Vit, you obviously work on this issue very closely. Your political party in the Czech Republic is set up to represent the interests of mayors and independents. I wonder, do you think the balance is right now between city administrations and central government, or do cities need more power?
So firstly, thank you for the invitation. I am not the mayor, and I used to be the mayor of Kolín, so of the middle-sized city, of small city with 30,000 inhabitants. It's my big pleasure to communicate here with the mayors of capitals of their countries. But I have to say, the smaller cities, it was really a huge challenge for them, because they are not in direct contact with the state government. And every good solution had to grow up from the bottom. And the real responsibility was really, by the time of the COVID crisis, on the local government. And when you see the numbers of the trust of the people in the Czech Republic now, the trust in the local government increased. The trust in the state government decreased. And I think it's the best proof that we, all the mayors around the world, we did really a great job by this time. And I have to say something to your answer. Yes, communication. And you have to see all different groups of people in your city. Because you want to communicate fast. You have some smart applications and you can communicate fast with the younger people. But you have to find the right way how to communicate with all people if you're in your town. You have to see the needs of all groups of citizens in your community. And it was a big challenge because you have to use the old town's radio. You have to get the information to the people in the streets because also the older people can hear them. You have to use the town's magazine and you have to communicate also the decisions of your government because by the time of crisis, you as the mayor, you as the member of the city council, you are responsible for everything. You have become the crisis manager, not the mayor more. And you have to manage everything in your time. You have to be all the day on the phone and people call you and ask you really everything. It was something very new and you have to do your usual agenda and you don't have time for it. You have a lot of stress by this moment and you don't have any crisis scenarios for the crisis like this one was. It was everything new. And I have to say, the local level didn't fail by this situation. And it's an important message for the citizens of the cities. And it was also the best way how to show you are real responsible for the town. And the states level, the communication, sorry for it, was horrible.
Well, let's get on to that now and actually switch to Budapest because there's a huge issue, the conflict between the people that have to manage the crisis on a ground level and then the central government, which largely allocates the resources to do that job. And it's switching to Budapest and the mayor there, how difficult is it to do your job when you're in open conflict with the government? And can you speak a little bit about your experience dealing with the pandemic over the last year and a half?
Well, heartfelt welcome to everyone. I'm really glad to be here at this very, very high-level event. When there is a crisis, it is very, very important to have good cooperation between the different actors, between the different protagonists. Now, in our situation, there were three different parties that should have collaborated. Central government and also the pandemic institutions, so healthcare institutions, and then the municipalities, Budapest municipality and district municipalities, and the third party is the citizens, the inhabitants. So there should have been a very good collaboration between all of them. Now, I have to say that the relationship, the collaboration between the city management and the city inhabitants was excellent. And we also thought what Bratislava said, that every information had to be shared, whether it was sad information, bad information, negative information. And if we were not sure about something, we would also share our doubts with the people. I think that this really worked. And in Budapest, the statistics have shown that within the entire country, Budapest were the ones who most respected the rules. Like if you look at Google statistics and Google location statistics or network GSM network statistics, that showed that Budapest people were very, very disciplined, despite the fact that normally an urban population, according to certain theories, is much less law obedient and much less tolerant to these limitations. But statistics show that Budapest were very disciplined. However, the cooperation between the central government and the municipality, now that didn't really work. And I was very sad, I'm very sad to say that in the most difficult situation, when we're supposed to stand together, in that situation, there were very, very nasty political debates. I also got a supporting letter from Mayor Matúš Vallo when there was a hate campaign launched against the Budapest elderly homes. And I'm just telling you statistics. Again, it was the elderly homes of Budapest where the mortality rate was much less than in state institutions or national institutions, because we actually gathered all international experience and said that, okay, if our government is not talking to us, we would talk to other mayors, and we tried to make everything in a timely manner, all of the measures. Now, this was true for the austerity measures, and also after the crisis was over, we also started to make the easing of the lockdown faster than the central government. Let me give you a particular example. When Prague made wearing mask compulsory on mass transportation, this was like last March 2020, maybe first in Europe, then the Hungarian government's official position was that masks should not be worn. There were different billboards in Hungarian hospitals saying that wearing mask is negative. Only ill, sick people should wear masks. Now, under these very odd, absurd circumstances, we had to work. And I have to say that the unpreparedness of the government and the fact that they did not share information, they were just entering into success propaganda, as opposed to our very true communication. So this resulted in the fact that a lot of people in the countryside did not take the pandemic seriously. They were not following the rules, they were not wearing the masks, and as a result of that, there were much more death cases. Mortality was much higher in the countryside, despite the fact that Budapest is a very dense city, is an international metropolis. There is a lot of communication, a lot of traveling. Despite that, there were much more death rates in the countryside. And this really shows that holding back information, not spreading information, this is really life-threatening in such a crisis.
So you talked a lot about collaboration as well and lessons learned, and talking to your colleagues in Prague or Bratislava about the situation and bringing policies composite to that. But I wonder if we could address one of the specific problems that all of you have in managing cities, and that's mobility and transport. Now, there is a huge fight everywhere, pandemic or no pandemic, about the space for cars on the street, whether or not cycling lanes should be buttressed. All of you are having to deal with that separately in your urban areas. I wonder, Matúš, specifically, how are you facing this situation? Because on the one hand, all cities are investing in cycle lanes, all cities know they need to improve air pollution levels. However, motorists are very angry about this and they want to be able to freely commute into urban centers. What can you do to stop this war between the two sides?
I mean, we are the city which decided to never stop public transport. You have like the city divided in two parts. There were a few cities which completely stop public transport. We decided not to do that, and we are still losing a lot of euros a month. And I need to say that in the worst, it was January 2021, where we had like 10 or 15% of people in our public transport in comparison of 2 years ago. But I spent first a year and a half of my work as a mayor in Bratislava to invite people to the public transport. We are pouring money into it. We changing it for better, and it's very difficult for us to say don't use public transport. It's not safe. But when it was necessary, we did it. But we also keep it working because there are still people who need it. And this is also our only answer to problems with transport in general, transport in Bratislava. We need to return when it's going to be safe to the public transport because we cannot travel in the city by cars. It's never going to work. We cannot make streets bigger. It's not working in this way, and it's again connected with our campaign for vaccination. Because that's the way how we can, in safe way, return to public transport. I need to say, when we're talking about cycling, of course, is our desire to use this situation, or it was our desire to use this situation to have to be more radical in terms of new cycleways and so on. But I need to say, maybe in comparison with other cities, the fact that we are installing or building a new the cycleway in the end must be decided by state police, and they don't have in Bratislava not at all understanding for bus lanes or cycle lanes. So this is the fight we are doing, if even before COVID.
Yeah, and just to switch to Budapest and Gergely, you are facing big problems there, I understand, because, of course, you also are very favorable to cycling lanes. You want to roll out clean mobility infrastructure there, but the motorists are battling back. How can you solve this situation in Budapest? And in the wake of the pandemic, has that changed the perception of many of the city population about public transport and about cycle lanes and the need for clean, open-air mobility?
Well, similar processes were there in Budapest, similar to what we've heard about Bratislava. The decision was to reduce mass transportation, not to stop mass transportation, just like in Bratislava. We didn't stop it. And again, there was a huge drop in our revenues. And there were some other economic and financial problems as well. But as I said, community transportation, mass transportation revenues dropped dramatically. We were also very, very worried that public transportation is a source of danger under the pandemic. But now we can see from the statistics that only 1 or 2% of the infections came from public transportation. There were much more dangerous things because, there were not, in our case, most of the people respected the mask wearing obligation. And normally, people do not have a chat in the metro or in the bus. So it didn't really spread in the public transportation. So I fully agree with Matúš that on the long run, motorization has to be replaced by an alternative. You cannot use just cars in the city. And this is going to be a long-term effort to bring back people to mass transportation. Now, as far as not only from terms of revenues, but in terms of using it. We had some ad hoc interventions in the city. In the city, we made interventions preferring mass transportation and cycling. So in Budapest, we doubled the number of bicycle riders in a year. We doubled the number. And also we created a new public bike sharing system. So we have a bike sharing system, a new system now. Quite quickly, we managed to build that up, which is very popular now. And apparently, the demand even says that we should double or triple the capacity. But now that life is back in the city and a lot of people, most of the people do work again, and there is commuting, there is movement. Yes, indeed, there is a conflict between motorists, so cars, and others, because now, the entire transportation and traffic is increasing, and there is a conflict. But on the long run, I think it is mass transportation and the clean forms of transportation that will work in such a big city. And this conflict is also increased by the fact that a lot of investments that we had to stop during the pandemic, because the construction industry also stopped, we have to relaunch these investments. It is just today, this very day, that we are closing one of the bridges of Budapest, which was the first permanent bridge bridge on the Danube in Hungary. For 1.5 years, we'll have to close down this bridge and the cars will not be able to cross it.
Right. I want to come back actually because you made an interesting point about returning cities to volatile, great, normal life on the streets with bars and cafes open. But just first, to go to Vit, I come to you last on this point because you obviously have a national view. And I wonder, from your party perspective and having been a town mayor, do you think it should be only up to city administrations how they invest in their public transport systems after the pandemic? We're talking about the building of new cycle lanes, investing in public mass transit infrastructure. Is this a question for cities, or do you think there should be a national push everywhere to really roll out cycle lanes and such like?
So I'm sure you have to have the state strategy, you have to have the regional strategy and the city strategy. But I'm a friend of big power of local governments. We are close to the people, and I love the decision making close to the people. It's the wonder of local governing because you know the real needs of people, you are in touch with people, and you can prepare the town strategy for the particular needs of your own town. And it's the right way. In the case of my town, we tried to support the public transport. We tried to prepare the infrastructure for electromobility. It's a big challenge for the next years in every city, not only in the capitals of their lands. And what we try to do is to speak to all group of citizens and to be mediator in this conflict between car drivers and bikers. And it's the huge discussion in every town in the Czech Republic. You have to have some vision for future. Our very simple vision is everything for our children and for our parents is the official vision of our town. And when we want to do everything for our children, we have to create the streets which are full of green and which are full of bikers lines in the town, because it's the time of living we prefer in our city. But you have to count with the situation. The number of the cars is really huge. You have to find the right solution for parking capacities, but you have to prepare the best infrastructure for the bikers. We built a new parking house for bikers in front of the railway station in Kolín. And it helped. Yeah. It helped a lot because we have this parking house full of bikes every morning. So it goes slowly, but you have to find the right solution, I think.
And Matúš, how do we get back to normal life now in cities? And then looking ahead, you think in 5 years' time, what will you look back at Bratislava and say, okay, now we do this really differently to what we did before the pandemic? So what elements of normal life will be completely different to what they were 2 years ago?
Yeah, this one is a tough one because, of course, I need to say that the first thing I understand that we did something right because the team of my colleagues it proved itself to be a very good one. You never know the real situation you have in your team. In a good situation, you cannot see that. And what we did in a good way is to choose right people which are governing in Bratislava with me or with us, and that's very important. In crisis, we thought that the team is absolutely one of the pivotal things. So in 5 years, I will be sure, like today, that the people around me are good chosen, and that's very important. What is going to be different, of course, is how we are looking in our situation in general way. It's never going to be like before, because we know that this kind of crisis can come and completely stop the world. It wasn't about Bratislava. It wasn't about Europe. This is a whole planet which stops for a few months, and the crisis is a very serious one. And so, of course, I will always keep in mind that we need to have some backdoor, not only in terms of money or in the situation we are actually in, but in terms of what maybe some kind of list of values should be. We're going to do more for, of course, these two groups of our citizens, even if we're doing a lot for elderly people and homeless people, because I saw that it's the thin between the line between definitely life and death is so thin and was so difficult to keep it straight, this line. So this is real, and actually people wants to go back to the normal. We saw it during the first day where the restriction was in the end, and people were crazy in the street. Everybody was celebrating, drinking, and people are going back to the normal. I think it's our task, municipalities, for example, to have always in mind that the situation can change in few months, very radically.
We're rapidly running out of time, but I just want to go to you, Vit, with the same question. What's the path back to normality in cities now? And also, what in 5 years will you look back and say, this is completely different to what we had before the pandemic?
So we should divide it into what we will see in reality and to what we should see. And I think we should see much more power for the local sphere in decision making. Also much more money for the local investments from the side of state, and much bigger trust from the side of the state's government in the local governments. It will be a big discussion of the next years. And the time was really challenging and it had a lot of different sides. One of them, we have in our town a huge Vietnamese community. And they were so helpful in the time of pandemic, so active, financial, and they were prepared to help to everybody. And it helped us, in reality, to overcome some prejudices in our city. So it's one of the positive results of this time. It was also challenging in the question of developing some new types of communication with citizens. We have special town, cities application, and we can deliver the information to the citizen very fast. And it still works. It's the positive result of this pandemic time. So I think the communication between the local government and the citizen is, after the pandemic time, much more closer. And also the conservative representatives of the towns are able and ready to communicate on networks, are able to be in touch with people every day. And it's one of the positive results of the pandemic, and it's also the future of the governing of cities.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And let's go back to Budapest to address this, because more than any other mayor, I think you're swimming very much against central government on a number of issues in the context of the LGBT law that was passed this week in Hungary. I mean, Pride is coming up on July the 3rd. How do you as a mayor try to bring normal life back into Budapest while maintaining its reputation as, a huge, vibrant capital of Europe, in the context of a really rancorous political debate at the national level too?
Well, yes. One of the findings of the pandemic, that the old green thinking of think globally, act locally, this is probably even more true after the pandemic than it was before. I fully agree that governance of tomorrow has to have much more weight on the local governance, because it is more democratic on the one hand and it is more effective on the other hand. So the municipal level. The Hungarian government quite often just tries to confront effective governance and democratic governance. They say that if it's not democratic governance, it is much more effective. But this is just the contrary and just the opposite, as it turned out during the pandemic. If you're closer to the people, you can just govern much more effectively. Now, the other thing, once we are talking about global issues in this panel, the exposure of the world is exposed. This exposure is not sustainable on long-term run. Actually, the supply chains has to be smaller, because if there is a crisis in China, everything stops. If there is a ship that blocks the Suez Canal, then everything stops. So I think the world will have to focus on local economy more, and will have to create much shorter supply chains. I think this is one of the global lessons learned. And probably there's another thing, and please allow me to, because I'm so bored of Hungarian internal politics that I rather like to talk about the global things and not Hungarian internal politics. But again, as far as cities are concerned, it is during the pandemic, we learned to value the most important asset of the city, which is public spaces. It turned out during the pandemic that everyone needs more public space. It is the catering. The caterers would like to open terraces. The mother with a small kid would like to have place for the straw to push the kid. The grandmother would like to have a tree which has a shadow where you can sit under and you can be on open air. And these demands cannot be met at the same time. So we need to just strike a priority, how to use our public spaces and what to do with them. Shall we just turn our cities into parking lots, or shall we turn our cities into parks? Now, this is two different things, and this is a major division, and here you need a lot of discussion, a lot of empathy, but I think people start to feel how high the stake is concerning the public spaces of cities. And I'm sure and certain that the cities of tomorrow will have to be greener, and that requires space.
Okay, and I just want to take, we're fast running out of time now, but this is a really interesting question that we've got over the GLOBSEC app, which is about how a city's better placed to make the changes necessary to battle, for example, the climate crisis than national authorities. Is there a lot more collaboration that can happen between you? All three of you here today may be speaking on a more regular basis, sharing experience with other mayors as well. Should this be a platform for combating major global crises? Maybe Matúš, I can start with you on that.
I mean, it's very important to say that the cities and mayors are more accountable. So it means we are more closer to people, as already was said. And of course, the things are, I don't want to say we are maybe under the big pressure, because it's not true, but if I promise that something must be done, or I'm going to deliver something, people just want to, I can meet them on the streets. They can ask me on the street if the things are done. And this is just a small scale of maybe for the bigger solution to the big problem of climate change, for example. And I think all other mayors and also the mayors from our Pact of Free Cities, which Gergely founded, we are sharing the same experience. We cannot do false or empty promises. That's the main thing. If we are promising something, we need to deliver that, and that's the small, in a small scale solution, which must of course go to the bigger scale.
Great, thank you. And Vit?
So it's very easy. So I think the cooperation and the sharing of good practice, it's also one of the very positive results of this COVID crisis, because all mayors were communicated. It wasn't important from which party they are. The cooperation was very close. It's the experience from the Czech Republic. And it was something what I really missed at the very beginning of my mayor's career. It was in the year 2010, and I was 32 years old without experience with politics. and I always try to find some information and some possibility how to share the good information and do good practice with my colleagues. And it's in the small things in the cities we can discuss together about bike lines in the cities, but also about the big challenges for the future, climate change and so on. So the good practice sharing is the future.
And Gergely, in Budapest, do you think there should be a lot more collaboration between city mayors across Europe, maybe even beyond, to figure out ways to battle the crisis all cities are facing? And, you know, Anne Hidalgo in Paris talks about the 15-minute city a lot. Is this an interesting proposal for you guys as well?
Igen, a járvány idején
Well, yes, during the pandemic, very scarce information coming from the central authorities was very scarce. We hardly got any information from the central government, but we got a lot of information from other mayors from Europe and outside Europe as well. There were good practices and best practices that we could adopt. And we also saw that we are not left alone because all the other cities were suffering of the same problems. And this was very important for all city leaders. And I think that the cities really just managed to share experience, and this was not about party politics, this was beyond party politics. And also climate change, accommodation, social exclusion. These are problems that accumulate in big cities, and we can only be effective in fighting these problems and countering these problems if we work together and we share our experiences. So the city governance, so local governments and municipalities should be the pillars of these fights. So I think the European Union, the right thing to do would be to consider the cities to be an important level of decision making. Obviously, the European Union is primarily an alliance of countries, of nations, states. But again, crisis management is more effective on the city level, on the local level, the municipal level. And not only because problems do come on these levels, but also because in these settlements, there is a much more support for the measures against these global problems, because city inhabitants feel these problems on their very skin. So I think local economy, local politics, local communities, this is going to be the better, nice new future, the building of which is one of the topic of this conference. So I think locality has to play an important role in this better future.
Okay, thanks. And we have got about 1 minute and 10 seconds left. So I'm going to put each of the three of you on the spot and ask you to do a little pitch for your own city in 15, 20 seconds, specifically telling everybody externally what your city has done right and how best to build back better from the pandemic. Matúš, I'll put you on the spot first.
So what we did right? That's the question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always difficult to talk about what we did right. Other people should tell this, but I'm sure we today Bratislava is a city which 50% of its citizens with vaccine. We have more than 75% of our elderly people also vaccinated. We did a campaign. We did 2 campaigns, and I think we did it right. The first one was our only vaccine is discipline. The second one is it's a time to hug again, of course. And now we're doing a campaign for vaccination, which is important. We maintain a good level of communication. We were able to manage the crisis for the citizen who we are taking care of this group of people I told already before. And what is new for us that we make a new relationship with private businesses, with big private businesses, for IKEA, one of the biggest Slovak banks, and we are building on it, and we continue to cooperate with them, which is nice.
Thank you, Matúš. We're now stealing time, so Vit, I'm going to have to just get you to give us 1 sentence as opposed to 15 seconds, and same for you, Gergely.
Okay, the most important thing was the community encouragement. It was the biggest success.
Okay, thank you. And Gergely?
Well, I would say similar to Matúš, this is an open, frank communication that considered the citizens as adults and included them, so participative and inclusion population, which is very important in a crisis. I think we did this right, although we also probably made mistakes as well.
Thank you very much, and I very much like that. Discipline is our only vaccine. That's a great phrase. So thank you. Not anymore. Yeah, now we have a real vaccine. But thank you, the three of you, for your time on this panel. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and I'm sorry we couldn't take more questions. In just a moment, we will go straight into our next session. That's Radoslav Danilak from Tachyon. We'll talk about a new processor they say is so powerful it'll revolutionize AI. Let's have a look at that.
You most likely have a phone or a laptop.